How's the sound? Can everybody hear me? I'm testing the sound before starting here. We might have a fun one, or this might be an interesting situation with new firmware. So we're gonna figure out what's going on. Right now I'm just setting up the camera, so it's gonna take a second. Thanks for telling me the sound's good. So let me check to see how everything looks. Well, give me a second to get the camera working. Let's see, why are you not showing up? Okay, I'm just waiting on the camera, so it's going to take a second more. So I'm going to put it on a different screen, and hopefully the camera will work. So at the moment my camera's not active, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on because it's kind of important. So I'm going to try a different slot here real quick. There we go. Let me check to make sure it's working. There we go. Okay, I had a little bit of a camera issue for a second, but today we have a new firmware that came out. It looks like it may have came out last night or today, but I don't remember checking last night. So the experiment that we're going to try is seeing how well it loads. So if you have questions, let me know. I'll check on the chat real quick here. Let's see, somebody's saying, guys, somebody know information about configuration of Marlin 2 to configure a hypercube using an SKR 1.3. Basically, a lot of my tutorials will cover some of the stuff. Obviously, the firmware has changed, as we're going to talk about today. So first thing I want to do is actually show you guys what's changed. So I'm going to go over to the web browser and show you what's going on. On the web browser, if you go to downloads, originally we had, over the last couple of weeks, first 2.0.8, then it was 2.0.1, then I think they went to 2.0.81, or excuse me, 8.2. Now it's 2.0.9. So let's check the release notes, see what they're talking about here. So it says Marlin 2.0.9 is a progressive release featuring a major overhaul of the motion system. The number of linear axes now can be configured, allowing anywhere from one linear x-axis only up to 6. So X, Y, Z, U, V, and W. The names of the axes can be customized to your liking, barring conflicts with other G-code parameters. So they're saying you can do more than a 6-axis printer is what they're saying right here. Let's see, new machines and boards, the Octopus version 1.1. I don't have that one yet, I have the 1.0, but those are going to be tutorials that I'll be posting one at a time, hopefully on Saturdays. They added Slovak for a language, or Slovakian. Actually, it's probably Slovak now. Sorry, I'm thinking in terms of back when it was Czechoslovakia. So it's the Czech Republic and then also the Slovak Republic, I think. Let's see, FTDI. This is, I believe, a wiring scheme, but I could be wrong on that. I'd have to look it up, but it's a different type of touchscreen, possibly. A lot of other stuff, I'm kind of skipping over it because I don't want to read it all to you, but you can see there's a lot of interesting things they've added. They've fixed some issues, configurations. They've done some, what is it, G29 is homing with, what is it, sensorless, or it's a BL Touch homing. They made some kind of change with it, because normally G28 is home XYZ, and then this one is for a retry and recovery, I guess, so that's new. The retry and recovery part. Let's see. Probe temperature compensation of values. I don't know what that is, but it probably has to do with the thermistor. Processors. So this is the STM32F. That would be something for like the Octoprint probably, or the SKR. And also I think the GTR, but I have to look those up. So there's probably going to be a lot of things in here I don't know, but you know where to find the information at least. So we're going to go over to my folder in a second and unzip this because I downloaded it just before we began. So let me switch you over there. So I'm going to right click on this. Notice how it says 2.0.x, and I just pulled it down about 20 minutes before we started. So we'll extract all. Now there are example files you can download I don't recommend it only because when you use example files, they call them example files for a reason. So if you use them, you're either creating peril for yourself or you might not understand what's going on. So I've made tutorial lists that cover a lot of things between the SKR 1.4 and also older ones. Some of the stuff is still relevant, but obviously some of the process will change because they changed the firmware on me. So I'm gonna bring up VS Code. I'm gonna go to Explorer, open folder. Then I'm gonna go to the downloads, the first Marlin folder, the second Marlin folder, then select folder. And I'll check on the chat while this is going on. Okay, so far it's a little quiet. So as you can see, as it's coming up, it's got some changes in it that if you haven't been watching in a while, you're not going to know about, but I'll point them out. They've added some folders. So this is going to populate. Also, platform.io.ini is significantly smaller. So what they've done is they've added this ini, and that's saying point to this folder structure to find the answer. And the answer is usually your default environment. So if we go to the ini, you can see that they're broken out by chipsets. So you've got your AVR, which is 8-bit. So this would be like the ramps right here. And these are 32-bit, but there's only a couple for this. And then the ones that they're talking about, which we're probably going to look at right now, is the most commonly used one, which is going to be the LPC 1768 and 69, which are right here for the environments. Now it's the similar process for other things. So if we go to the STM32F, you can see that down in here, they break them out by manufacturer. That's your default environment for the FISEC. And then they have, you know, the S6 up here. And let's see what else. They have the SKR Pro, which we'll try out in a second, but I want to try like a mix of 8-bit and 32-bit just to see if things work. And then maybe we'll dive into something else and see if we can find any bugs. Probably not going to find any bugs, but we'll just try it out. So first thing we're going to do is a simple compile just to see how things are working. So I'm going to go over to platform.io.ini. This is what we're currently for the default environment. We're going to use the LPC 1768 or 9 because I'm using a turbo board. So let's start with that. I'm just going to plug it in with USB to see if it actually loads across. So I'm going to grab a cable and plug it in and see how it works. So it lights up obviously. And it sounds like there's a good ding. So let's go over to the desktop and check to make sure we're good there. If we go to Device Manager, we can verify that it's there. And the COM port, which in this case is 7. But let's set it up for the actual environment. So I'm going to go to Marlin, Source, Core, Boards.h. I'm going to search on SKR_14. It might be V14. And there it is. So this is the LPC 1768. This is the non-turbo one. But we're going to be using turbo. So I'm going to copy that. It's a different processor, by the way. And this is also a clue where you need to look. Meaning if you go to the environment for the INIs, you'll see there's an LPC 176x.ini. So now that we understand that, or you're new to it and now have heard it, you understand what I'm about to do. So I'll copy the turbo. Then I'll go to the Marlin folder. Actually, give me a second because I'm a little lost. There we go, config.h. And we'll search on motherboard. And we'll paste it right here. Now, there's also some changes that they made with how this operates. Normally I use the first serial port for the board, so I do -1. This may vary and this may fail, I don't know yet. Then they have a default speed that they put in here of 250,000 bits. Then down here they have another port. This is recently added within the last month, where they have a second port, but you can adjust the speed. And so if you're 115/200 for your touchscreen display, you can actually set that, or you can change it, it's up to you. And then they have a third port as well, but I'm not going to have a lot of time to play with that today. So that's all we're going to change for now. And then we're going to change in platform.io.ini. We're going to change this to LPC 1769, which is the INI default environment. When we go over to here, this is where I'm getting that value. So we know what our board is, we know what the process is for the actual processor. So I'm going to do a clean first, because sometimes inside the .pio they have the Mega 2560 that they compile first and then upload. There's not a lot of information in here, but I want to clean it out just to make sure there's no failures. So I hit the little garbage can that does clean. Now I'm going to do just a plain vanilla build or multiple compiles. And as you can see, it looks like it's running fine. If you do come across an error where it fails, try a second compile. If it fails on the third time, find the very first error in your compile and fix what that problem is, because the other ones are caused by a cascade of issues. So it looks like it compiled fine. So now I'm going to try upload, and this will send it over to our board. And while this is actually building and then sending it over, which it's just said successful, we can check on it. So if I go over here and I go to the D drive, you can see there's a firmware.bin, and it looks like it just uploaded this minute. And then we have the old one from 2 weeks ago, it looks like, or a little bit over that. So we're good there. Looks like I messed up the date for today. It should be the 18th, not the 17th, but we'll get over that for now. So I'm going to go over to the board and see what's going on. So on the board, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a disconnect and a reconnect of the power just to cause this. And the jumper is currently set for USB. When you're using motors, you want to move it over to the direct power over here. So let's pull that, reconnect, and then in a moment what we'll do is we'll check to see if everything shows up. So while that's going on, I'm going to go to my desktop and open up Prunterface. So it's probably going to show the correct COM port. So let's take a look at the desktop that I have up here. I have just opened this. It says COM port 1. It's probably going to display the other one or a couple of them, but let's see what it is. So if we go to Device Manager, again, we can see if anything changed. So in here, we can go to the ports and it says 7. So we know it's 7. So I'll go here and I'm going to click connect and see if it connects. So let me change this around a little. So watch the board, something might or might not happen. Looks like it connected fine. Now we can check the end stops. So there are none connected, so they should all be triggered. So I'll do M119 for the G code. Press enter. They're all triggered. Now let's do M503 to see what's on the actual configuration. And as you can see, it's the default configuration that should be in Marlin. So 80, 80, 400, and then 500 for E. I'll show you what I mean now. If I go over to VS Code, inside here for configuration.h, if I search on A4988, it looks like they've enabled the steppers for X, Y, and Z, and also the extruder. But if we scroll a little further down, we'll see 80, 80, 400, and 500. So we know that that's correct. If we were to change this, we could verify it with a compile and upload. Let me check on the chat and see how things are going. Well, good night. Okay, somebody's going to sleep, by the way. But as you can see, we now have that answer. Next thing we can do is we can try to see if the end stops actually work, or we can try to run the actual stepper and see how that works. But they said something about changing steppers down here. So as you can see, there's an I, J, and K. Now originally I thought they said different letters, so let's go check that real quick. So if I go over to what they said in release notes, we can check to see if they match up. So it said something about additional steppers. So here it says XYZ UVW. So the documentation probably is a little off, considering that that's not those letters. Not a big deal, but now you can see that obviously documentation is not the same as the actual work that we see. Let's see. Someone's got a question. Ed, are you sure you're using the turbo? The board doesn't look like a turbo. It is a turbo. So I'll unplug it and show you in 2 seconds. Obviously I got to clean it up a little here, so let me show you what I'm doing. So I unplug this, and it's not written on the front on this board. It's actually written on the back. So it's right there. So it is a turbo. Unfortunately, the newer ones I think are labeled on the front, but I'm not sure because I haven't bought another one yet. So I'm going to put that down for a second, and we'll test the motors, and we'll also test the actual LED or touchscreen, because I know that's a major concern for people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first move this off to the side, and I developed a little jig that I'll show you. Let me widen this out a little and move this over. And so there's a jig that I created here for showing the actual back of the panel. Now on the back of this panel there's several different things. This panel is for the touchscreen for the TFT 35, and I'll show you the front side in a second. But here's where the cable goes. I believe for the, yes, it does go there, pardon me. It goes for the TFT cable. You can either use just the TFT cable, or you can use both of the ribbon cable slots. There's actually 3 on this one, which makes it slightly confusing, but we're interested in 1 and 2. So there's a third one. I don't know if I'm pointing to them in order. It looks like I am. But you can also do end stops and power on this one. And then there's an SWD loading here. There's also loading through the SD card. It's got an ARM processor. And then of course it has Wi-Fi that you can build into it, as well as it's got USB, so you can load files that way. There may be some issues with it, depending upon what's going on with Marlin's firmware and how it communicates. But I'm going to hook this one up in just a second. I just have to quickly label these cables. So I know there's 1 and 2 here, so I need to see what they are so that I can actually connect them correctly. But essentially I made a jig so I can hold it so it's not tilted all the time, which it is right now. And the whole premise behind this is so that you can see the actual setup and it's not running around on us while we're doing it. So I'm marking the cables right now with 1s and 2s so that I know which ones is which, or which one is which. And we also have our cable for the TFT pre-connected. So I'm going to take this out of the way for a second just so I can lock it down on the desk and it doesn't slide around. And I'll check on questions in just a second. So all we're going to do first is see if we can set up the LED and if it's working correctly. So unfortunately you're seeing the top of the jig right now, and I might have this upside down, so let me rotate it so that it's in position. So here's the touch screen. On the touch screen you have one wire that sticks out and there's a notch connector on the inside. This is your reset wire. So I'm going to show you real quick what that is. So I'm going to go over to the browser for a second. And on the browser I'm going to open up a new window. And we're going to go to GitHub. And we're going to go to first the SKR 1.3 because it has a 1.4 in it. Then we'll go to the manual, and a lot of you have seen me do this before, but this is for anybody that's new. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to find the actual diagram of the board where it says TFT. So on the board, the TFT is located someplace here, right here I believe. Yeah, it says TFT. But there's a better diagram that you can use for this, and that's the pinout diagram. So if you go to hardware and you search on pins, you'll find a diagram. And the reason that I do this is because you have more detail, but you can see where the reset button is. And that's the actual wire that we're concerned with. The rest of it has to align with that. So if we go back over to the configuration, and then we take the cable, we know reset's going to be on this side. We just have to align all of them together and then plug it in. And it powers right up. Normally you would do this without power. Now the other thing people like to do is actually use this in legacy mode. So I'm going to show you how to get into it. And obviously it says printer not connected at the moment. So I'm going to first hold this down. Then I'm going to turn it slightly till it says Marlin mode. And then I'm going to click down again. That's the legacy mode. It will not work initially until you set it up, but I've covered that in more of my recent tutorials. For now, we're just going to work in the touch mode. So in here, let's double check the speed. So it's menu, then it's settings, then it's connection. In here, it's baud rate, and right now it's 115/200. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use that speed this time and see what happens. So I'm going to click out of here and go back to everything. So I'm going to power this down for a second. I am going to add the capability of the other one by connecting the cables just so you can see. So this is cable number 1. So it goes in EXP1, which is right here. And then there's EXP2, and of course this is getting in the way, so I'm probably going to disconnect it. But those are the connections. They match up on both, but that's how you set up so you can use both. So for now, I'm just going to reconnect this. It's going to power it up. Now obviously it says that it's going to be unable to connect or no printer attached. So we're going to fix that now. Unfortunately, I got to figure out a way to deal with the glare here, so that might help. And I'll check on the chat before I do this. Yeah, sorry about the glare, I just fixed it. So let's go back over to VS Code, and we'll actually try and set this up. Now my memory of which COM port it is has faded. So let's see if we can figure that out. I think it is 1, it might be 2 or 3. But what you do is you search on motherboard. This will get you in the neighborhood. Then scroll up. And here's the other COM port. So right now we're using -1 here. So we got to use something other than -1. So it's probably 1 or 0. My guess is 1. So I'm going to take that off. Now, in order to have it work at the right speed, we'll remove the comment here. And we'll change the speed to 115/200. So this is going to hopefully work out of the box if I get this right. But that'll fix the issue of not being able to connect. So now what I'm going to do is click the upload button. and it's going to build and then upload to the actual printer or our mocked out printer. I'll check on the chat while this is going on. Okay, so now that we got that almost compiled, we'll go back over to the actual workbench, and I'm going to disconnect the power. Then I'm going to reconnect it, and we'll see if that error goes away. So give it a second. And it looks like it's not working. So what we can do first, because it says no printer attached, is we'll check the speed and see if changing it to match the board works. So I'm going to click here. Then I'm going to go to custom. Well, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to settings, connection, baud rate, and I'm going to change it to the other one just in case. And then I'm going to back out and see if this fixes the problem. And apparently it does not. So it might be that I connected something wrong. So I know it's powered. So I'm going to have to check my notes real quick. And one of the ways you can cheat to do this is actually go over to Marlin's website. And on Marlin's website, we can go back and we can look for their firmware. And sometimes it's in there by default. So we'll click on this one. And what we're going to do is we're going to find configuration.h, hopefully. So Marlin, configuration.h. Then we're going to find motherboard, and it looks like my other guess of 0 probably was correct, but I was nervous. So let's try that. So I'm going to go back over to VS Code. I'm going to change the 1 to a 0. Then I'm going to go back over to the workbench and change the speed back. So what we're going to do is menu, settings, connection, baud rate, 115/200, enter, back, back, back. And now we'll see if this works by going to VS Code. So I'm going to click the upload button again, and hopefully this will turn out better. Let me peek at the chat while this is going on. Okay. So this will only take a couple of seconds. Hopefully in the future I'll be able to speed this up even more for you, but I got to work on that. So now that we know it's loaded, we can verify it by going over to our D drive. Make sure it's there. It is. So we'll go over to the desktop. On the desktop, I'll unplug it. I'll plug it back in. And we'll see if it fixes it. And so it's fixed. So it's running at 115/200, whereas if we go over to the workbench for Pronterface and we connect, we're online and we're running at 250,000 bits here. So you can see there's a difference between the two. That's kind of cool. So now maybe what we can do is try out moving the axis. Obviously I gotta move some stuff out of the way here or it's going to be slightly dangerous. So I'm going to take the cord and lock it out of the position where it might cause issues. This is a safety setup issue. So let me get these out of the way too. And you might see the weight in the background, but that's okay. So what we need to do is power this. And if you haven't seen me do this before, on here, I mark these with red for voltage, and then for ground, I leave them uncolored. That way I know what I'm connecting to. So I'm going to grab a power supply in just 2 seconds. I just have to make sure I'm using one that's set up safely. So I have an extra power cable on here I have to take off. And I'll check on questions in a moment. And then we also have to set up actual steppers. So I'm not going to connect the power right away. I'll give you a close-up of what I'm doing here. So we're going to set up the X-axis. In this case, it's set for SPI with the jumpers. So I'll show you where you can check that or other configurations. So if we go over to the browser real quick, inside the browser, we can go back to the manual. Inside the manual, there's going to be settings. I'm going to use the steppers for UART, not for SPI, because I want to do sensorless homing. So down here, they show the actual steppers for X, Y, Z, E0, and E1. Notice how there's two for the Z-axis for motors. If you're using that, you may have to put jumpers on these two pins and these two pins if you're not using the second one. But if you have a failure, that's one reason it may occur. But here's step direction. So the dir means direction, obviously. And they show you the pins for the jumpers, which we're currently in. Then they have UART down here someplace. Here we go. UART says cover these two pins in red. So we're going to use a TMC 2209 because it's sensorless homing. And it's one of my favorite steppers. So let me find one here real quick. Now, warning in advance, I may have burned out a stepper and not known it. So if it doesn't work initially, I might have to change steppers. One of the newer boards that came out had an issue that cooked your steppers. So unfortunately, my stepper went up in smoke once. But I have a whole bunch, so hopefully they don't cook in the process. So I'm just going to grab one of these at random because I didn't mark the one I broke. And I don't know if I threw it out. And I'm going to set up the jumper pins right now. So what I'm going to do is take the dental pick and pick out these. And then pick out the last one. And I'm going to place it where it's said in the directions, which is these two set of pins, if I'm on them, and push it down. Next, we want to do the actual stepper for the TMC 2209. And the little hint for this, if you're using the type of stepper made by Big Tree Tech, it's got red and black, so you know what to line up. Otherwise, you have to look for the enable pin, which is in the corner right over here, and match them from the bottom or top of your stepper to the pin in that corner. And the diagram or pinout diagram can show you that as well. So I'm going to also move the jumper because we're going to be using direct power, and I'm going to slide it right here. And I'm also going to have to connect the power. It's unplugged right now. So I have ferrule connectors on here for safety. That's so that a wire hanging out doesn't get in the way and cause a bridge of the circuit and then fries your setup. So we want to avoid that. That's why I talk a lot about ferrule connectors. And I've shown on several occasions how to use the crimp tool. So they're in some of my older video streams. So I'm going to line up the colors. I'm going to slide them in. And then I'm going to tighten them down. This also provides a really good connection to lock these in place so they don't slide out. Okay, so that's in there nice and tight. Next, we're going to go over to the firmware, and I'll check on the chat in 2 seconds. Okay, so no questions yet. So let's go over to VS Code. So in VS Code, to set this up, I'm going to search. Sorry about that. I'm going to search on the A4988. Currently, it says that it's an A4988 for that stepper. We're using a TMC 2209, so I'm going to highlight it, copy it, and then paste it here. Now, a lot of people have been asking about doing standalone. There is a different configuration for standalone. I'm not an expert in it, but it involves flashing your stepper, I believe, which means that you cannot reverse it after you flash it. Plus, TMC 2209 works better, in my opinion. So, now that we have that set, I don't want to go through how this doubling works. I've done it probably about 50-60 times, but this will equate to your advanced configuration. So if I search on 800 to get me to where this would be, this will take us to the X stepper current. I usually go with 800 for the normal NEMA stepper drivers. When we do use this, you probably should use a fan, and I'll show that in a moment and how to do that. But the 16, if you double this, will give you more micro steps, but that means you have to double the 80. But for now, we're going to leave that alone. So we're going to go at 800 and 16 for the steps. I'm going to search now on TMC debug because this will show you what's going on if something is broken. I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to remove the comment. I'm going to search for the next TMC debug because there's two. And this enables a G code of M122 to do troubleshooting. Whoops. So I'm going to highlight this or remove the comment. Then I'm going to go up for a second. And I'm going to search on sensorless homing. And what you can see is right here we have sensorless homing. So I'm going to remove the comment. And we're also going to have to set sensitivity for the homing. Now this is set currently for the default of, I believe, SPI with the number 8. The optimal number that I found is about 125 for the TMC 2209s. It may vary between manufacturers, but that's what I like to work with. So now that that's set, we can go back to our configuration, verify everything's set. That's good. We may have to invert the direction of the stepper for the end stop. In this case, I'm not going to do it, but in other cases, you may want it to go a particular direction. So I'm going to search on invert so I can show you this. So down here, you can change the direction. This will allow you to move in the direction of where your end stop would be if you want it there. For now, I'm going to leave it alone, so it might go to the right instead of the left. But it's up to you. It's a taste and preference thing. But I need to set up a couple more things on the actual board that I forgot. So I'm going to transition over here real quick. I'm actually going to connect the cable so that I'm not confused as to why it's not moving. And unfortunately, it's stuck under there. So let me get this off to the side and slide this in. And obviously, I'm in a bad angle to see what I'm doing, so I'm guessing. So that looks good. Let me just check to make sure nothing's in the way. That's good. So let's go back and build this. So I'm going to do an upload and I'll check on the chat while that's going on. Okay, it's nice and quiet for questions. So this will take a second to build. It's not going to upload because I have it unplugged. So I'm going to move the jumper for the USB power back for a second so that we can do an upload. So I'll go over here, I'll grab this jumper, I'll move it back over here, I'll plug it in so we have USB power, and then I'll do a build again. So I'll go back over to the desk for the computer, do an upload. This will take a second to build. And then as soon as this completes, I'm going to unplug the USB, then plug it back in, let it load. Then I'm going to unplug it again and move the jumper. So here we go. So we know it's copied over. So let's go back over to the workbench for a second. I'm going to unplug this, plug it back in. I'm going to widen the angle so you can see more. And let me see if I can dial this in a little. So where it says that there's a printer error on the screen, let's see if I can move this over. So right now it says all low. That has to do with there's no power currently, possibly. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to remove the power. I'm going to move the jumper over. Then I'm going to connect the power. And obviously it doesn't power up yet, so I've got to get the direct power to this power supply. So I'm going to plug it in and hopefully we won't see any smoke. And then we'll see if the error is there. So the error is gone. So we can test this actually right now by going to Menu, Movement, and let's see, Move. Then we can do X plus. Of course, this is kind of goofy how the menu set up. So if you keep pressing this, it may move or may not. So I'm going to increase the step. So it is moving. So now let's try it inside printer face and see if it works the same. So inside printer face, we're going to connect to it. It says it's online. Let's try moving 10. It's moving. Let's try home. That works fine. So it looks like we're good for all those settings. Looks like it moves pretty smooth. So maybe we'll hook up the fan now just to see if we can get that to work. This might take me a moment more, so I'm going to have to power everything down and set up the configuration for this. So let me check on the chat before I do that in case there's other questions. Also, I got to focus the camera. When you're using 2 Z steppers for use with the G34, like on the Ender 5 Plus, where is it recommended to plug in the second Z stepper motor on this board? It's going to be E1. So there's an E0 and E1. I'll show you real quick what that looks like. So if I go over to the browser, I'll show you right here. It says E1. That would be your second Z driver, as long as you're not using multiple extruders. So it would be this one and this one. But also remember that on the actual stepper up here, let me see if I can find the diagram. I may have gone past it. You've got 2 outputs already. It's recommended to use the ZAM and the ZBM as your 2 steppers. If you're using a third one, you can use this one. But once you start using an additional stepper for an access, keep in mind that you're going to have possible jamming issues, because in some cases it's usually a very large printer. So if it gets kinked where one Z-axis is higher than the other, it might cause issues. So it's easier to tie them together into one set of steppers. So back to the other thought I had here. So I'm going to show you how to turn on cooling fans. So I'm going to power everything down real quick. I'm going to remove the power here. I'm going to move the jumper. Now there's 2 ways to do power. I'm going to bring a fan over. This is going to get interesting kind of quick because I like to use the actual pinouts, but for some reason it doesn't work very well when I jump them on a set of pins. And there's, I believe, a pin here and here for the fans, as well as over here and here. So I'm first going to try the fan for the signal pin. This may not work, but let's see what happens. So if I go over to the browser, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Over here we have 2 fans. So if we go to the pinout diagram, inside the pinout diagram under hardware, we can see what the pin numbers are. So as you can see right here, we have a fan that says ground and then voltage. So this pin is voltage right here, and this is ground. On the other one, it says ground, and then it says 2.3. That's a pin number for signal. That's the one we're gonna attempt to use. I don't know how well this is gonna work because I usually use the second extruder being HE1. But in this case, we're gonna try this pin first because in previous builds of Marlin, there were issues that were, it would not allow me to use this pin. So we're gonna test that theory out. So I'm gonna show you how to set it up now. I'm just setting up the actual fan so it doesn't move around with this little thing that I made that hopefully will work because I've never tested it. So I made this little fan holder. It keeps the fan off the table so it doesn't spin all over the place. And also I can put putty on the bottom so it doesn't slide around while I demonstrate it. So I know those can be hilarious to watch, especially when I watch it spin into something. So I'm going to place it right here. It's probably not going to be the best place to put it. I may have to reduce the actual light again. And I'm going to plug in this port. And I'm going to put it according to ground and signal. So I'll show you back again what I was doing. So if I go to the browser, we want to use the ground side and the voltage side. So we're going to put black on this side and the red on this side. So let's go back over to here. So let me make sure before I start to plug it in, and hilarity ensues. Actually, it's notched, so it should, in theory, work. And it's not working, so I'm going to do it the other way for the moment. It doesn't make a lot of difference, but I don't have a lot of light, unlike I would like. So that's plugged in. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to test it with power just to make sure that I didn't mess anything up and it doesn't go on automatically. So I'm going to plug it in, and I'm also going to make sure the jumper is set to power before I plug it in. So those jumpers need to be right there. So let's see what happens. So the fan doesn't go on, that's good. So I'm going to unplug it. I'm going to plug in the USB after I move the jumper back. This is so we can load the firmware without having to mess around with pulling out the SD drive. And the light's so low that I'm having trouble seeing the pins, so it's taking me a couple tries. So it's powered up. We got the error for TMC probably again, but we're not going to worry about that. We're going to go over to the desktop on the computer. Go over here, and to set this up, we have to set up a special fan. Now this might take me a second to search on, so I'm going to say, I think it's controller fan underscore fan. It might be the opposite, by the way. So let's do fan control, fan underscore control. It's not seeing it, so let's go back and say control underscore fan. It's not finding it. So let's try controller. And I might go by it if I'm not paying attention. So that's already at the end of the file almost. So let's scroll back up and see if we can find anything on fan. And they may have also moved it. So let's see what we got here. So we have temp sensor chamber. That's for if you're using a chamber. Obviously, I don't have a chamber set up for you guys to see. And I may have just scrolled past it and not known it. Let's see. Temp sensor cooler. It's not what it is. We want to do the stepper. So I'm going to search on stepper. And there's a lot of things for stepper. I might have notes someplace where I can look this up, but I might have to dig around for a second. And I think I've gone through twice. Well, let's search on -1. Maybe that'll make sense. There we go. So it took me a second. So this is an extruder. Auto fans automatically turns on when there's an extruder. So this is not the one we're looking for. We want the one for the stepper, but it may be nearby. So let's see. We have auto fan, chamber, cooling, extruder fan. They may have also moved it. So that's another thing we have to keep in mind. It used to be, I thought, on advanced config. So let's see what we can find. So fan, whoop. I'm gonna see if I can search on this string. I know it might not be successful. Let's do fan underscore pin. So we have use controller fan. And let's see what we got here. The fan turns on automatically when any driver is enabled and turns off or reduces to an idle speed shortly after drivers are turned off. So this is where we need to be. So in this case, I'm going to remove the comment so that the fan controller, now we have to set the pin. So in order to do that, we have to go over to the browser again, and we have to find the number, which is 2.3. Now that's kind of confusing, and I'll show you why. Because if you go over to source, pins, find our board type, which is the LPC 1769. Then we're going to find our board, which is the turbo.h. Inside here, there's nothing to be found for pins, but it gives us a note that it will use pins underscore BTT underscore SKR V1.4. Now that's not located in this file, but it is located right here. So we're going to find that real quick. And then we're going to see if we find anything new, and it looks like there's stuff. So we're looking for something like P2 underscore 3, or it might be 03. So we're going to search on fans through here. I don't want to jump to it just right away. I want to see if there's something that we need to see. These are all the steppers. Then we have the temp and bed. So I'm probably already scrolled past it. So I'm going to go to the very top, and I'm going to search on fan. And I don't see fan anywhere. So there might be something else going on here. So let's see what we got here. So at the very top of this file, we don't see anything telling us anything different. Let's try the very bottom. So if we go to the very bottom of the file, it says something about pins underscore BTT underscore SKR underscore common. So it means that it's sharing pins. So we're going to click on that. And inside here, we have the layout of the board with pins again. So we're going to search on fan. And as you can see, there's a P2 underscore 04. That is for the hot end. Normally this is the one that I have to use because it doesn't work on the other one. Instead, I'm going to try this one, but it's probably going to fail, and then we'll have to go to the other one. So I'm going to copy this. Then I'm going to go back to advanced where it says -1. We're going to paste it right there. And now that that's set, we have our pin. We also have a minimum speed, so I'm going to say it's 200 for the speed. Now there's stuff for the Z-axis here. I'm not going to mess with that, but it looks like this is grayed out, so it might affect our stuff. So for now, let's try building it and seeing if there are any errors. It looks like you can also add it to an LCD menu. That would be like the Marlin for legacy mode or the Marlin emulation. So we're going to avoid that for now. So I'm going to build this and see, just by doing the checkbox, if there's any failures. There may be. And I'll check on the chat while this is going on. Okay, let's see. G34 will not work if you're using a stepper driver for both motors. Interesting. And then let's see. Yeah, I'm unsure of the configuration that you're working with, Matt, but one thing I can do or tell you is try testing it. Just be careful when you do. So it looks like it actually uploaded. So I'm going to go over to the board for a second. Sorry, I accidentally opened something while I'm doing this. I'm going to remove the power, bring the power back in, let it boot for a second. Obviously, we're getting an error. So it looks like it's fully loaded. So I'm going to unplug it. I'm going to move the jumper over. And as you know, the light's kind of dim for me, so I'm going to plug this back in. Then I'm going to find the power cord and plug it in, and it technically is called a smoke test, so hopefully there won't be any smoke. So it's powering up. So what we can do is we can test the fan by just moving the x-axis. So menu, movement, move. Then the x-axis, we're going to move it 10. And the fan doesn't seem to be operating. So let's move it back or try homing. Maybe it'll go on for that. It also could be I configured this wrong. So movement, terminal. So let's try terminal. So G 28 space, and we're going to say X. Hopefully that'll only do the one axis, and we'll send it. And the fan's not working. That's awesome. So let's power this down and see if we can do it the other way. So I'm going to unplug this. So it looks like the fan pin might have some kind of conflict inside the program. So we're going to try the other fan, but I have to fix this one because as you can see the ferrule came off, so it's going to take me a second to actually find the cabling for that. So let me grab a ferrule. This notoriously pulls off every time I put one on, so hopefully we'll be lucky. And we're going to use the actual port for the second extruder, because there's something or some kind of exception that might be in there. I'm just making sure I'm grabbing the right ferrule here because I don't have a lot of tiny ones. And I need the ferrule wrench or clamp or whatever they call it. So here's the ferrule tool. If you click it, it just crimps down. So what we're going to do, let me lock this down to the table so it doesn't slide around while we're doing it. So I'm going to take the black wire and put a ferrule on it. Normally I don't like to do this during a stream because things move around a lot, and obviously things go wrong in my stream, as many people have seen. So hopefully this works. So let me put this down, like right over here. The second extruder I think is this one, but we'll check on the diagram in a second. So the first thing I need to do is separate this wire out from the other one. Then I need to find the ferrule, which I dropped someplace on the table. Give me a second to find it. Here we go. It's also a different size ferrule. So I'm going to slide it on the wire, push it all the way down to where it can go, take out the crimps, and doing this live might not be great, but we'll see what happens. And then I'm going to crimp down as hard as I can. And if you buy these initially, keep in mind you may have to adjust this by taking out this bolt and making it tighter or looser, depending upon your preference for crimping. And after that's done, hopefully this stays on, but it's kind of loose and obviously the ferrule's bigger than normal. So I may have an issue, but we'll find out. And let me double check which one we're going to connect to, because I know I'll screw that up if I don't. So let's go over to the website for a second. And what we're looking for is HE1, which is the second extruder. So I had them backwards. This is your first extruder, HE0 or E0 in this case, and then E1. So it's this one right here. So let's go back and do that. So I'm going to take out the screwdriver. I'm going to do it by color. So I marked it with red and black. So voltage is red. And let me move this over. I'm going to slide it in. Hopefully it's seeing it correctly. Tighten it down. It appears to be the correct one. Slide in the other one. Tighten it down. And we're good there. So I'm going to rotate this around to stretch the wires, just so you can see it. Normally this would rest above the stepper, or it would pull or push air across it. I have a couple of things on Thingiverse that show how to set it up for like a Ender 3. Granted, I do it for dual extrusion, so it's a little bigger than normal. So let's change that setting. It's going to be actually 4. So let's go over to the desktop for a second. Bring it up. So the value in here, which seems grayed out, actually I know why it's not working. It's this right here possibly. I forgot to uncomment. So let's do that first. We're going to connect the other one up next door to it just to see what's going on. Hopefully this will reach across. It's too short, so I'm just going to spin this over and we'll make that change in a second, because obviously I didn't get it right the first time. I'm going to plug this in, hopefully. Sorry, the light is extremely dim on my side. There we go. And I'm going to unplug this, move the jumper over so I can load via USB. Now you can do this with direct power. I just like doing it this way because there's less electricity in the system. And of course you didn't see what I did, so I'll show you. Over here, I connected the other fan for the moment on that port that we are using. So let's go back over to the VS Code and try sending this over. Now we got errors. So what's the error? So in this case there was a failure. It says you cannot set controller fan pin equal to fan pin. So apparently we can't use that, but we can try this. We can comment out this line and maybe it'll work by default. So let's try that. So it doesn't like that either. So let's double check the error here. Okay, so it's not working for us that way. So let's try the other configuration. So let me remove the comment, and I'm going to say this is 4 instead of 3, I think. But let's double check it because I probably get it wrong. So if we go up here to common, should still be on the fan pins. So we have the fan pin that we thought it was, and then we have the second extruder, which is 2, 4. So that should be good. Let's try building it again. And that appears to work. So while that's building, I'm going to go over and change this back. So I'm going to take this fan out. You probably want to power down your system when you do this, but then I'm going to slide this one back over into position. So it's built. It looks like it copied over because it didn't copy over. Sorry. So we got to do an upload. And if it goes to the D drive, then we know it worked. So it says it went to the D drive. So let me show you what I'm doing because you can't see it. So I recompiled because it failed the first time up here because there was no ability to upload, or I had it configured wrong. But then I rebuilt it and it was fine. So let's just upload. It already went to the D drive, so I'm just copying over it again. Let's go back over to the workbench, and I'm going to disconnect it, reconnect it, wait until I hear the beep, because that means the firmware is finished loading. We get our normal error. I'll disconnect. I'll take the jumper and move it to direct power again. This is also important for the steppers. Plug this back in. Obviously there's no power. Then I'm going to take the regular power and plug it in. And hopefully this won't be a mess. Okay, so let's go over to menu in a second after I hit focus. That's good enough, I guess. Menu, movement, move it 10, and let me slide this over a little. Hopefully the fan didn't go on us. And then I'm going to move. And the fan goes on. Now the fan won't go off initially. There might be a timer, but we have to check the settings in the firmware to confirm. But let's try doing motors off in Pronterface. But of course, when I connect in Pronterface, this might shut down the motors as well. So we can test that. So I'm connected. Now let's see what the fan is doing. It's still going. So I'm going to click the motors off button and see if it changes anything. This might take 60 seconds, and I'll show you how to confirm that in a second. I just want to give it a couple seconds, and I'll check on the chat while that's going on so that I can burn up the time. So let's see. A couple of questions while I was away. Let's see, you forgot to uncomment controller fan. Yeah, found out about that. And then that is why the stream is live. We've got to get to see everything. Yeah, you get to see me make mistakes. Obviously, I sometimes figure them out. Sometimes I get a little lost. Apparently someone wants to know if I want to become famous, but apparently they don't know that my name is famous. So it's the most read about name in history, by the way, for people that know or don't know, but it's spelled differently in another language. But I'll let you guys figure that out. I probably already babbled too much about it. It doesn't really matter to me because I'm not that famous. Anyways, back to the fan. It doesn't look like it stopped while I tried to babble for a couple of minutes. Oh, it did stop. So it did stop after 60 seconds. Sorry, I have to look. It's about 3 or 4 feet away with dim light. So we're good there. So what I want to do now is we can look at the firmware and see if there's settings that we can change for it. So if I go over to the desk for a second and I go over here, we're going to actually load the firmware a different way. But we'll go over to configuration, and as you can see, idle time, active speed, minimum speed. I don't really mess with minimum speed. I just want it to go on when the steppers are moving. So let's try, let's see, seconds, extra time to keep the fan running after disabling motors. So we do have to hit disable before they'll stop. So let's try 5 seconds just to see. And I'm also going to show you how a different way to load. And then maybe we'll do controller menu so you can see that. So I'm going to click the upload button. It's going to upload the firmware because we've got direct power going. But then we're either going to have to power down or hit the reset button. So I'm going to power down and then power back up. So let's go over to the board in just a second. Okay, it uploaded successfully. We can double check that real quick by going over to the browser, D drive. We've got a brand new build that happened within the last minute. So let's go over to the board. I'm going to unplug it. That will power down the entire system. Then I'll plug it back in. It's going to take a second. We probably won't have the TMC error. So let's go over to Pronterface. And this time we're going to move this way. So I'm going to move the axis to home. And we'll watch the fan. And the fan went on, but I don't see it homing. So obviously I did something wrong, possibly. Actually, I don't see the fan moving. That's awesome. So let's see what's going on here. Can't read from printer. So I may not have been connected when I tried to do this, but it said disconnect, connect. So let's try connect. It says it's online. Let's try it again. Home, and now it's working. So I may have done something that I wasn't paying attention to. The fan's running. It's running for more than 5 seconds, hopefully. So I'm going to do a motors off. Now to see the command in here, we can also turn on debug communications. This will allow you to see G codes that are being sent. So I'm going to do the motors off. And what you see is the M84 was sent. And the motor should shut off in 5 seconds, which it did. So debug is your friend. If you have issues, you can see more granularity with what you're doing. So let me check on the chat. You have to expand. Yeah, I do need to expand. But so far we've got that set up. Now, maybe I can do the menuing just so you can see that. I'm trying to run through all the functionality on this board, but I might just break it down and start a different board just so you can see what's going on. But we've checked a lot of functionality here, so maybe that's a good idea. Let me see what I got here for different hardware that might be confusing that I can show you that I haven't already showed you. So let's try a different manufacturer like the 8-bit processors, because I've showed you a lot. And a lot of this I've done in past tutorials, but it's more to check to see what works and what doesn't with the new actual configuration. So let me clean up real quick here. I'm probably not going to do the steppers on the 8-bit because we're running up to about almost an hour and a half by the time I'll finish this. But let me clean this up real quick and I'll watch for questions in a second. So when I actually tear this down, I like to make sure everything's powered off. I know where the power cord is. like to hold the cables just in case. Okay, that's fine. Need to disconnect this as well. And I'm disconnecting the wrong one. Okay, let me get that out of the way. Disconnect this. And we're going to try and load the other board. Obviously, I've got a little bit of putty that I got to get out of the way. So we're going to try an 8-bit board, see if it's working. So I'll show you the way that I like to do things with boards, because if I use the same config file, I might run into an issue where I have to modify a bunch of things in the config. So let me grab a board real quick here. So here's the actual board that I began with when I learned to 3D print. And I went through a lot of these boards. This is part of the reason that I do tutorials, is because I don't want you guys to have the same wonderful experiences I had of smoking boards. Granted, it does happen. If you're in this hobby, you'll have to prepare yourself for it. But I'm going to put the board down here. It's basically an Arduino Mega 2560 underneath, and then a ramp shield on top. Some people call it a hat, or they have another terminology for it. It's a shield, essentially. So it connects. We know that works. Let's go over to the desktop for a second after I make some mods here. So in order to change this easily, I'm going to close the folder, and you can't see what I'm doing. Then I'm going to go over to the desktop, downloads. I'm going to delete the old one because it's a mess. It's all set up for SKR. I'm going to right click and extract this one real quick. So this will extract pretty quick, hopefully. And I'll check on questions while this is going on. If you want me to expand on my name, in Hebrew it means son of Abraham, or descendant of Abraham. So apparently somebody in my family was famous, or a couple people. Not me. Anyways, let me go back over here, and as you can see, if you click on Open Folder, Downloads, go to the folder we just unzipped, select folder. Then you want to go to, obviously, this folder, which they put up in front of you. It's already set to the chipset we're working with, being the Mega 2560, so we don't have to change the environment. We can go over to the Marlin folder, go to the configuration.h, and search on motherboard. Obviously, it's asking me if I want to upgrade right now. I don't want to, so. And you can see it's set to the ramps 1.4, and it's got the default for the serial port. So we can check this first by doing a build, not an upload. Obviously, it's the same folder that we're building to, so hopefully there won't be any errors. And so this building kind of quick, considering the configuration's the normal default, so it was like 12 seconds. Now we can do an upload. So this should be the same process but quicker, and then we'll see an upload information occurring down here, these right here. So this is sending hex to it instead of binary. So it's 0 through F in hexadecimal. Octal will be 0 through 7. Sorry, my memory's kind of faded, and then binary is either 0 or 1. So that uploaded, so we can test this. We don't have to do any unplugging. So the board's all set. Let's go to Pronterface. Pronterface is going to be a challenge because it's not 7. It might be 16, I don't know. but it's definitely not 1 because that's the printer default COM port for a desktop. So let's go to Device Manager. Whoop, sorry, you can't see what I'm doing. So 1, 7, or 16 is what we have for options. We can try 16. It doesn't connect. We can try 7. It's probably not going to connect. And we can try 1, and it will not connect. So what we're going to do is go over to Device Manager and find the port. So here's Device Manager. Let me just drag it to the right screen. We'll go to COM ports, and it says Mega 2560, and it's COM port 8. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to remove the 1, change it to an 8, and press connect. So it looks like it connected, and it did the M503 automatically for us. That's something I'd like to see on other boards, but I'll live with it for now. I'm going to turn off the debug because it can be a little bit much. And we'll test the end stop real quick, and then I'm going to wrap this up for you guys. So M119, press enter. It says triggered because nothing's connected. Now we can test that real quick. So I'll show you how to do that. So inside here, we have to set the board up for the actual end stops. I'll show you how to look up the diagram real quick. So if you go to the browser, on the browser we go to ramps 1.4 pinout. We need to know what the pins are and the order of them. So it's waiting to load here. So over here you see S, negative, positive. So this is voltage, ground, signal. So I have the board inverted right now, so I'm gonna reverse it 180 degrees so I don't hook this up wrong. So let me bring it back over to the board real quick. I'm gonna invert the board in the direction it should be. And then I'm going to plug this back in after I connect the end stop. So let me grab an end stop real quick here. Or what I thought was quick. Apparently I don't have an end stop directly the one that I want. Hang on a second, let me look around the room. So I've got 2 different end stops. I wanted to show you the one that everyone uses. I think it's in a little bin below this table, but let me just make sure it's not directly next to me. I think I found one. Yep. Okay, so this is the example I like to use. This is a smart end stop. I marked on it green, black, red, so signal, ground, voltage. This is notched for a connector. So it's pretty simple. I'm going to put this down on the table in a second so it doesn't move around. But apparently I'm having issues with putty that you can't see off the screen. Because apparently it's getting a little warm in the apartment and the putty starts to break down. So hopefully I didn't get it stuck everywhere inside this end stop. Sorry, I'm trying to get the putty out of there. Okay, so I'm going to stick this here. Now we know signal's on top, ground's in the center, and voltage is at the bottom, and we want to do X min, so it's the very first one. So I'm going to put this in here and then show you the wires. So voltage, ground, signal. We'll power it back up. We'll test it real quick. A little light goes on, and then we'll go over to Pronterface and see if I can not mess this up. So in Pronterface, we're gonna reconnect. We're gonna do an M119 to check the status. It still says triggered, which is a little bit worrisome. So what we can do for this is we can test it, but first I want to check before I actually click it because I might have connected it backwards and not known it. So I'm going to go over to the actual pinout diagram before I test it, but I've already clicked it once and we didn't see any smoke. So it's not a bad idea, but let's check anyways. So if I go over to the browser, inside the browser you can see that it says signal ground voltage, so we're in the right position. And if we zoom in, you'll see X minus right here. Then I think it's X plus, then Y minus, Y plus, but I could be in the wrong position. So let's see what happens when I actually test it with my finger. So I'm going to go back over to Pronterface and I'm going to click it with my finger. And then I'm going to hit M119. And now it says open. So the logic is backwards. So I'll show you how to fix that real quick. I don't know why it's backwards. It used to be forwards, but let's fix it. So we go over to desktop, go over to VS Code. Inside VS Code for configuration.h, we'll search on NSTOP. And it says NSTOP settings. These are the current ones we're working with, and we're trying to invert it. This smooths out the signal for either a pull up or pull down. We don't really care about that. So we have NSTOP inverting. So I'm going to invert false to true here. This might be a change that they made in the firmware and I didn't know about it. So let's try building. And then we'll try uploading. But I got to disconnect in Pronterface. So I'll show you that in a moment. Granted, some cases you can upload, but it's good practice to go over to your actual Pronterface and disconnect your connection. So disconnect, and we'll go back over to VS Code and we'll do an upload. And we'll see if the logic is right after this. These are just common issues that come up while you're working on your printer. And these are simple fixes. Otherwise, you might be able to, well, this is the best way to fix it. I'm not going to give you other solutions. So that's uploaded. So we got to pull the power. No, we don't need to pull the power because it should be loaded already, but good practice is to pull the power and then put it back in. So I'm going to do that. Now the COM port generally doesn't change, but you know how to check it because I've showed you about 4 times today. So let's go over to Pronterface. Let's reconnect. Let's try M119. It says that it's open now, so let's trigger it with our finger and click it again, and it says it's triggered. So now we know that it actually works, and it works correctly. Now, inverting of these may change. If you're using like a filament end stop for checking for a filament runout, you may have to reverse the logic, but that's a separate issue. That'll be under the actual configuration, probably an advanced configuration, unless they moved it to configuration.h. So let me check on the chat, because obviously I'm starting to stutter. So everyone take care, be safe. For those that have been doing super chats and I missed them, thank you very much. And for those that donate on PayPal, thank you very much. And also my patrons, thank you very much. Everyone take care. If you have questions, remember that I have a Discord channel that you can go to and ask questions. If I'm not there, other people like to answer as well. But usually I check in on it a couple times a day. But everyone, thank you very much for coming and take care.